8. Our focus today is on the dark shadow forming at the heart of the multiversal crisis, the impending arrival of Doctor Doom. The consensus from the source material fundamentally reframes Doom, suggesting he is far more than a conqueror. He is, in fact, the self-appointed architect, positioning himself to correct reality. This ambition, it challenges the entire premise of the MCU's definition of heroism versus villainy.
It really does.
So the critical question we face is one of pure causation. Which specific event was the primary fracture that destabilized the multiverse and truly triggered Doom's path to intervention? Was it Doctor Strange's highly specific mystical violation of the dark dimension using the time stone? Or was it the cumulative, systemic, and repeated violation of time initiated by the Avengers during the time heist in Endgame? I'm going to argue that Strange's singular, precise, mystical act was the foundational wound, the initial violation that opened the specific door Doom required.
And I come at it from a different angle, one that focuses on structural integrity rather than, a single fracture point. While I'll concede that Strange's action created a unique wound, the evidence suggests that Doom is concerned with macro-level philosophical justification. The Avengers' repeated systemic manipulation of time proved a profound truth, that reality was fundamentally editable by flawed emotional beings. That revelation of systemic vulnerability, that total loss of control, provided the overwhelming ideological justification for Doom's sweeping intervention and his radical correction plan.
Okay, I see why you emphasize the scale of the Avengers' impact. But let me give you a different perspective, one rooted squarely in the cosmic rules of magic and dimensional stability. The true origin point of the crisis lies specifically in Doctor Strange, the 2016 film. We often view that battle against Dormammu as a victory, right? Intellect over power. But cosmically, it was a catastrophic transgression. The source material describes Strange's maneuver vividly. He forcibly injects a foreign law, the linear progression of time, into a timeless, infinite realm like the dark dimension. This action, by its very nature, inflicted existential damage on a dimension that operated outside of temporal physics. It wasn't just a tactical loop, it created a paradox that had two immediate and I think structural consequences. First, it generated a precise, unmistakable, multiversal disturbance.
This specific, localized signal was recognizable only to a mind capable of analyzing both cosmic science and forbidden magic. A description that is, it's tailor-made for Doctor Doom. Second, and this is crucial, it instantly collapsed the foundation sustaining the Ancient One. Her death became inevitable, not just due to battle, but because the system that provided her dark dimension energy, the safeguard against such dimensional mingling, was shattered by Strange's paradox. Strange didn't just win a temporary battle, he executed a precise maneuver that fractured the multiversal barrier, removing the last metaphysical defense that kept Doom's path closed.
That's a compelling argument regarding the mechanism of the Ancient One's demise. And yeah, the unique nature of the Dark Dimension breach. But it still focuses on the singular acute trauma. Doom's project, the total correction of the multiverse, is, it's just too comprehensive to be triggered by one specific magical signal. Doom is fundamentally focused on the ongoing viability and health of the entire multiversal system. I'm drawing directly from the source analysis here. Every major catastrophe after Endgame traces back to one decision, the time heist. The Avengers didn't just break a rule. They normalized the act of breaking existence. They weaponized the time stone and Pym particles to treat time as a linear track that could be arbitrarily edited, reversed, or, exploited to fix personal mistakes. Doom views this as a macro problem of governance. The fact that the ultimate fabric of reality could be so trivially and repeatedly manipulated by beings driven by desperate, emotional, and ultimately flawed choices is the true systemic chaos he seeks to solve. It is a fundamental, ongoing crime against order that demands the permanent solution of correction and compression into a single controlled system like Battleworld. The Avengers provided overwhelming, visible, and repeated ideological proof that freedom without control is chaos. And that level of systemic failure is what validates Doom's totalitarian solution.
The distinction between a single precise cut and generalized decay is everything in this argument, though. Strange's act was the initial break, the single moment where the ultimate law of dimensional physics was broken for the first time. The chaos of Endgame was certainly messy, but when the Avengers used the Time Stone, they were largely operating within established temporal mechanics, creating branching realities that could be pruned or addressed as we saw in the subsequent crises. Their actions, while reckless, were within the rules of temporal exploitation. Strange's act, conversely, redefined reality for a timeless entity. It wasn't about branching, it was about forcing a law, time, into a place where that law could not exist, creating an instantaneous, irreparable metaphysical defect. That precision, that unique type of violation, is what gave Doom the specific strategic vulnerability to exploit. The Avengers made him less. Strange created a structural failure at the core of the multiverse's magical defense system.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that the precision of the cut is more important to Doom than the scale and duration of the wound. Doom is concerned with sustainability. While Strange destabilized one dimension and removed one safeguard, the Avengers sent a broader, undeniable message across countless realities that reality itself was editable on a whim. I mean, consider the immediate fallout, the TVA, the emergence of Kang variants, the literal erosion of the barrier between dimensions resulting in the No Way Home crisis. Doom doesn't fear one magical paradox committed years ago. He fears the continuous, systemic, and visible failure caused by the hero's repeated intentional editing of history. If reality can be broken and fixed by a group of traumatized individuals, it's not stable. The source material is explicit that the continued emergence of new threats and timeline fractures caused by the hero's desperate actions is the long-term structural failure. Doom views this as evidence that the heroes are incapable of self-governance. He sees himself as the only adult in the room who can restore order, and the chaos immediately following Endgame is the perfect demonstration that order is required.
This brings us directly to the, esoteric history of Kamar-Taj, which I believe strengthens my position. We have to consider the theory that Doom was the original architect of Kamar-Taj itself, establishing the foundational principles of reality engineering before the Ancient One revised and constrained those rules, building safeguards against his totalizing view. If we accept that premise, then Strange's violation served as a direct announcement to Doom that his original philosophy, that reality is something to be engineered and can therefore be corrupted, was profoundly vindicated. Strange proved that the Ancient One's safeguards had fundamentally failed under stress. The Ancient One rebuilt Kamar-Taj on principles designed to limit power and prevent cosmic corruption. But Strange's action and the subsequent direct death of the key defender removed the last safeguard that kept Doom's long-term path closed.
An ancient pattern of failure, essentially signaling to the original architect that the building was structurally unsound and ready for his revision. This failure made Doom's return not just opportunistic, but intellectually inevitable.
That's a compelling piece of lore. And I agree that Kamar-Taj's history points to Doom's long-standing view of reality as a mechanism to be optimized. However, it still focuses too much on the esoteric mechanism of his return, the key, and not the overwhelming justification for his plan, which is what motivates his entire Secret Wars goal. Doom is a genius, but he's also patient. He doesn't rush, he doesn't conquer impulsively. He is watching systems fail at scale. What he is observing post-Endgame is not just a theoretical failed safeguard, but the practical, visible decay of the multiverse, the immediate ripple effects leading to universal instability and collapse. This systemic chaos gives Doom the powerful moral argument he needs. His true weapon is not a blast of energy, but the perspective that the multiverse is dying because of the hero's unintended cascading consequences. If the price of their victory is the slow death of reality through structural instability, then Doom steps in as the savior, not the villain. He required this widespread failure to morally destabilize the Avengers and justify his totalitarian corrective measure.
But if Doom is truly motivated by macro-systemic chaos, why the sophisticated signal response? General chaos is plentiful. Why wait for the specific fracture? I maintain that Doom received an explicit, sophisticated signal from Dormammu or the residual energy of the Dark Dimension, detailing the specific, actionable weakness, that the sacred rules of Kamar-Taj had been broken and that the Ancient One was dead. This strongly suggests Doom's arrival is a direct, strategic response to a unique, precise opening created by Strange, not just a reaction to the general state of things. Doom is too strategic to respond to generalized messiness. He needed a specific structural weakness, the fracture of the barrier and the removal of the primary magical defense. The Avengers' actions provided the ideological backdrop, yes, but Strange was the key who broke the final seal, providing precise, actionable cosmic intelligence for the only mind capable of capitalizing on it.
He didn't just open a door. He provided the blueprints to the castle's weak point.
I absolutely refute the idea that Doom is motivated by a mere mystical signal, especially if that signal came years before his true intervention. If Strange's act was the decisive fracture, why didn't Doom arrive during the blip? Why wait until after the most destructive, reality-altering time manipulation event in history? The delay itself suggests that while Strange created an opportunity, the systemic chaos unleashed by the Avengers created the necessary condition for Doom's plan to succeed. Doom's ultimate ambition is structured. He doesn't just want to invade, he wants to compress it, stabilize it, and lock reality into a form that can no longer spiral out of control. This requires far more than strategic positioning. It requires an ideological correction. He needs to convince the heroes that they are the problem. This is why he must exploit the Avengers' resulting guilt and trauma. He aligns characters like Wanda, whose cosmic actions were driven by intense grief and emotion, with his worldview. He validates their pain as proof that freedom without order is destructive. His goal is not invasion, but total transformation. And that demands him to exploit the truth that their reckless victories, committed in desperation, have devastating systemic costs. That is the ideological fuel for Battleworld, and that fuel was overwhelmingly supplied by the consequences of the time heist.
I think we can find a point of convergence here. Both events were failures of the heroes. But if we trace the initial irrecoverable damage, the evidence still points back to Strange's single defining act. The Dark Dimension violation was the specific, irreparable wound that created the multiversal disturbance and simultaneously removed the singular central defense, the Ancient One. Strange was the unintended key who gave the architect the necessary structural weakness to exploit the moment the system failed.
On the other hand, the Avengers' systemic failure to manage time and reality, proving repeatedly that time manipulation could be done recklessly by deeply emotional, unstable beings, provided the necessary ideological and practical chaos that justifies Doom's comprehensive plan for correction and stabilization into Battleworld. Doom requires the moral high ground to perform this transformation, and the Avengers handed it to him with every desperate jump through time.
Ultimately, the source material forces us to question whether the greatest danger to reality emerges from a precise, magical violation of reality's deepest, oldest laws.
Or from the catastrophic, cascading systemic failure caused by the flawed agency and desperate choices of the heroes themselves. The architect views both paths as undeniable proof that the system is irreparably broken, requiring the ultimate sacrifice of freedom for absolute, necessary control. There is clearly more to uncover in the layers of Doom's planning.